All right, we are now live on Facebook, both the TMDSAS and Texas Health Education Service Facebook pages. Thank you all so much for joining us today. We have a fantastic panel joining us today from UT Southwestern Medical School. But before we do get into our introductions, we did want to take a moment to recognize some issues that are going on in our country. And first off, we'd like to ask for a moment of silence
for George Floyd and Breonna Taylor.
In recognition of the struggles that continue to impact Black community members in our society. So we're going to take a quick moment of silence in recognition and solidarity for them. Thank you so much. All right, well, we are very pleased that you are here to join us today. We have a great panel joining us from UT Southwestern. Before we get to them, we'd like to introduce ourselves. My name is Enrique Hasso, the Associate Director of the Texas Health Education Service. And joining me for today's current session, as always, is Dr. Beck.
Good afternoon, and welcome to the session this afternoon. I'm the advising coordinator for the Texas Health Education Service, and previously I was at the University of North Texas as director of the Health Professions Office for 18 years.
And joining us from UT Southwestern, we have Dr. Angela Mahalik.
Hi, I'm the Dean of Medical Students and Associate Dean for Student Affairs for UT Southwestern, and I'm also a pediatrician.
We also have Leah Scouten.
Hi, everyone. Really pleased to be here. My name is Leah Scouten. I'm the Director of Admissions, Recruitment, and Onboarding at UT Southwestern Medical School.
And we have Dr. Craig Rubin.
Hi, everyone. I'm a professor in internal medicine and a geriatrician, and I've been on the admissions committee for about 9 years and fortunate to chair it the past couple of years.
Great. Thank you all so much for joining us today. We know this is one of the busiest times of the year. I'm certain that you all have a lot of other things that you need to take care of. So we really appreciate you taking the time to address some of the concerns that our applicants are facing this year, particularly with the impacts caused by COVID-19. To get us started, I do want to reemphasize that this is a live Q&A. So if you have any questions that you'd like to ask our member institution from UT Southwestern today, please do share them in our feed. I will be looking through all of your questions and we will be answering them as they're coming in. We do have a list of questions as well that we'd like to ask them, but this is your time and we want to make sure that you have as much opportunity to ask them any questions. So first off, let's go over some of the changes that have happened at UT Southwestern in response to COVID-19, particularly around the admissions process. Would you mind answering that?
Sure. Yeah, I can start. We've made a lot of adjustments across the whole TMDSAS community. We've met monthly, if not more frequently, to really, address the sort of challenges that our applicant pool is facing with COVID-19. At UT Southwestern, we've made a number of changes. Primarily, we've adjusted our application cycle dates. So acknowledging that applications are not, or just started coming into UT Southwestern on June 1st, we've shifted our entire sort of interview and review cycle back. We will be interviewing a month later in the season and we'll be sort of holding interview slots much later as well to recognize that Mcat scores will be coming in a delayed fashion this year because of the Mcat score cancellation. So our cycle has really shifted to make sure that we're able to review and consider students who may have been affected by all the Mcat cancellations. Of course, the TMDSAS match has also been delayed about a month. So what we've really just seen is kind of our cycle being shifted back, and we're fully prepared to interview even later in the season if we feel like we have a strong applicant pool coming in sort of in the later months of the cycle.
Those are some major impacts. I think in a typical application year, we're pushing for you to submit your applications early, to have your Mcat done at a certain time. And this is a different application cycle. And so I appreciate you sharing that input. Would you mind sharing, what the first batch of transmitted applicants look like on your end? Maybe some of the plans that you all have for the review process. And maybe some feedback for anybody who has the dreaded September 29th Mcat test date.
Yeah, I mean, so on Monday of this week, we started seeing applications roll into our system. How it works at UT Southwestern is once your application is transmitted from TMDSAS, you'll get an email shortly thereafter, usually within about 24, 48 hours, with an invitation to complete our secondary application process. And that is a required step for us for all applicants. We are waiting for Mcat scores. So in order for you to be reviewed, we do need a current Mcat score on file. But us, like many other schools, we are consistently reviewing, reviewing applications throughout the entirety of the cycle. So if you are, one of those students who is taking, the Mcat in September, I wouldn't delay submitting your application. TMDSAS will still process your application. It will still be transmitted to us. And once your score is in, we'll review your application. And like I said previously, we are very, very aware of the sort of downstream impacts of the Mcat cancellations. And we by no means want this to sort of penalize you. So we are very prepared to be interviewing through the month of January. If we need to add interview dates in February, we can do that. And we're going to, be practicing flexibility with our admissions committee and in our screening process this year to make sure we haven't extended all of our interviews come, September 1st. So, we are fully aware of those impacts, and, we'll be screening and rescreening your applications throughout the entirety of the cycle and, up until our last interview date.
And there was a collective sigh of relief from all of the applicants in the pool, right? Thank you for sharing that. We do have a couple of questions following up on the Mcat discussion that have come in. Again, we're here to answer your questions, so please feel free to use the chat feature to ask the questions on either the TMDSAS or the TXHES Facebook pages. First one comes from Megan. What do you recommend to do if I took the Mcat on 5/29, yet I'm unsure of how I did? And if there's a possibility for rescheduling later in the summer, should I go ahead and submit my application or wait until June 30th when the scores come out? Thank you. If you don't mind, I'll take this one. I think based off what Leah just said, we definitely encourage you to submit your application before you have your Mcat scores in. It does take TMDSAS a while to submit or to process your application and to get it transmitted to the schools. It takes a couple of weeks at most. And as Leah just said, there are constant updates coming from TMDSAS to all of our member institutions. So if you don't have an Mcat score yet, as soon as it's released, the schools will know when you took the Mcat and when to expect that score. And so they'll be expecting that update. And the same if you opt to retest and you have the opportunity to take another Mcat test later in the cycle, we definitely encourage that if you believe you're going to do better. But don't just take the Mcat just for the sake of retaking it. Make sure that you're doing something different to improve. And I'm sure Dr. Beck could have a whole session, a whole courage session on just improving your Mcat or DAT scores. But we'll just keep this brief for right now. We have a question from Fatima. I had a question pertaining to sending in applications without an Mcat score. Will primaries be reviewed? Leah, I believe, just answered that question. Could I have a chance to get an interview without a score? I think that's a follow-up question.
The answer to that is no. We do require an Mcat score at UT Southwestern in order for your application to be considered for an interview invitation. So you will need a current score, valid score on file with us, to be invited to interview here. I should also mention, and maybe we'll talk about this a little later, one of the new requirements for UT Southwestern, in addition to the Mcat, we are going to be requiring the Casper examination this year as well. Many schools are already requiring it, both across TMDSAS and nationally. So very likely you'll need to take that exam to meet the requirements of different institutions across the state of Texas and in US. But that is a new requirement for UT Southwestern. So I did just want to put that plug in at some point today to make sure that's on your radar. For us, if you're invited for an interview, it will be required that you have that submitted to us and that score is transmitted to UT Southwestern by your interview date, so our committee can consider it during sort of committee meetings and deliberation. So it is it's something that you should be aware of and sort of plan for as you're preparing and taking the Mcat as well.
So as an institution that has Casper, do you have any guidance on what the timeline for taking the Casper might look like? Should they take it after submitting their primary, the TMDSAS application, but before submitting a secondary application, or is there a preference?
I mean, I would, so our secondary is also a required step in order to be considered for an interview invite. So, it is important to kind of get on that secondary application relatively quickly after your application is transmitted to UT Southwestern. Nothing should really prevent you from, registering and taking the Casper early. It's an online sort of web-based exam. And our interviews will start in mid-August this year. So, they'll run from mid-August through really January, and not knowing kind of when you'd be sort of considered or invited for an interview, it probably is best to try to kind of take that early so that you're prepared, come your interview date and we have that score on file with you.
Thank you for that. We have a question that's come in through the TMDSAS page, and that is the review process regarding the Mcat still true for a reapplicant who may have already had an Mcat score?
Yes, and Enrique, correct me if I'm wrong. So for reapplicants who apply, their previous Mcat score would be transmitted to UT Southwestern. And that score would be considered if that's the score you're applying with. And to piggyback off what Enrique said, if you're retaking the exam, your application would again be re-reviewed once that new test date came in and TMDSAS updated the application with that score.
Now, logistically, as a reapplicant, you would have to resubmit your scores to TMDSAS, and then TMDSAS will receive those and transmit them to all of the schools to which you've applied.
Enrique, you might also want to address the issue if they are repeating the Mcat and that those scores haven't come in yet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. In the situation that you're presenting, Deb, does that mean that somebody already has an Mcat and they're just waiting on new Mcat scores?
Right.
Yeah. So on the TMDSAS application, you do enter all of the instances at which you've taken the Mcat and all of the times that you plan to take the Mcat. And all of this information is transmitted to the school. So as soon as your application is transmitted, the schools will see that you have a previous Mcat and have a planned Mcat. So would there be a situation perhaps where somebody has a planned Mcat and they've already taken the Mcat, but you see that there's a planned date, that you might wait until that planned test score comes back before you reach out to them for an interview invite?
I guess theoretically, I mean, we'll evaluate their application based on the current, Mcat that they have on file, but ultimately we'll look at their highest Mcat, test. So if they retook it and get a higher score, that's the score that we'll evaluate. If they retook it and got a lower score, we'll still evaluate their sort of original highest score. So we will look at their highest, score from a specific test date.
Great. That actually just answered about 3 more questions that came up. So we're doing great here with time. So Vivian, you just asked that question about whether having a lower score the second time might affect you. Ms. Scouten just said that, Ms. Scouten just said that, the higher test is what's going to be looked at. But of course, everything on your application is fair game and assessment. We've talked in previous Courage sessions about how one semester is not going to make or break you. It's going to be the trend and the overall application. And so if there's an overall trend of you maybe not performing as well on a, OChem 1, and then you have to retake it 2 more times to get the score that you wanted, and you see the same trend happening with the Mcat, I think we're going to see a larger issue that the school might want to get some more information on. And so it's all about everything that you're presenting in your application. All right. You have another question here from TMDSAS. I'm submitting my TMDSAS application soon, but not taking the Mcat until July 23rd. With TMDSAS application, transcripts and letters received before then, just a quick note, transcripts will not be sent in until TMDSAS requests those. So hold on to them until TMDSAS requests them. Don't open the envelopes. They have to be submitted in a sealed envelope, but hold on to them until TMDSAS requests them. So with the TMDSAS application, letters received before then, would UT Southwestern review my application or hold off until the Mcat score has been received? We've addressed this already, that UT Southwestern will review your application, but will not extend an interview invitation until an Mcat score is received. All right. So we have another question that I think might be for either Dr. Mihalik or Dr. Rubin. Do you value any major over another when choosing your medical school classes?
No. So, for first of all, we like diversity. I mean, there's many different interests, and people can come from different majors or life experiences and be equally wonderful physicians. I would say that certainly if somebody is a non-science major, you want to make sure that the relatively few required science courses, you're able to demonstrate your proficiency and ability to successfully complete those courses. But we have no predetermined preference of one applicant or another. And as I said, we actually like diversity in many regards, but including different interests.
And so I like that you bring up the issue of diversity in an application. And I know that one of the new elements that has come in the past couple of years has been the identifier of a non-traditional student. Would either of you mind giving our applicants some insight on what you've seen as results of non-traditional, people identifying themselves as non-traditional, and maybe contrasting that with what you might define as a non-traditional?
So, there's no precise definition for that. And certainly applicants self-determine whether they perceive themselves as being non-traditional student, and they define for themselves why they think they are or are not. I think in the most sort of restricted definition, if you will, is the person who, traditional would be, 4 years of college and then immediately apply to medical school. The non-traditional would be somebody who, obviously completed their undergraduate education, but has done something else, maybe different career, delayed application, has other circumstances. But that's something that, I don't think we have a predetermined definition, and this is something that's discussed amongst the committee in general. But I guess that's my response. I'm not sure if anybody wants to add anything.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting question that when I think TMDSAS added it a year or two ago. And, we do see a lot of different responses, and, it's everything ranging from someone who had, previous careers before realizing medicine was their track, or for whatever life circumstances they had, they needed to work and be employed for a couple of years, to some students who took one gap year and consider themselves non-traditional for whatever reason. So it's interesting to see how students identify themselves, and and how they explain their sort of path. And I think that this question just gives some additional data and gives some additional context to allow students who do consider their path to be maybe non-traditional or sort of quote unquote out of the norm to really explain that and provide some context to the committee about it. But I don't think there's one right or wrong answer. And I think it's important to emphasize the question's not there to help or hurt anyone. It's to give that data, to give that context to the committee. So just because you're a quote unquote traditional sort of path student, you don't have to put anything in that section. It's really there to give the committee more insight and let you explain your story a little bit further.
Thank you for that. All right, we've gotten a flood of questions. I'm sifting through them. We have a question from Delhi. If you have a C- on a prereq course, will the school still consider your application?
So certainly we don't, I can't think of anything that we arbitrarily, by one single factor will not consider somebody. So I guess that's a short answer that, we don't look at an application and see a certain grade and dismiss further evaluation of that application. Certainly we want to make sure that anybody that is accepted is successful in completing a very rigorous 4 years of medical education. We want people to succeed. And so that's our a primary mission in terms of the evaluation. But a C- without any context, we really can't comment on. I mean, there might be excellent reasons why somebody had a C-. There are opportunities to explain that C-. It depends what that C- is in. So the short answer is no, we would not exclude somebody based on a single grade. And we would look further. And it's up to the applicant to, if they recognize something that might be raise concerns about their application, we would hope that they would use the application to explain personal circumstances or situations.
And we do offer a directed question in our secondary application. It's optional. You do not need to feel compelled to respond to that, but it gives you the opportunity to explain anything else you'd want the admissions committee to ultimately know about you. And that would include an academic anomaly or blemish on your transcript or whatever. I think it's important to, again, provide that context so that the admissions committee knows how to sort of interpret that score, but to not make excuses, right? And one of the things is sort of, how have you grown from that experience? What have you learned? What can you sort of take from that? So I think that's something to kind of keep in mind if you are using that section to address something.
And Enrique, I might add that most advisors would advise that student to repeat the course, especially in a prerequisite course, just to see if the initiative is there to do better. And again, if there were extenuating circumstances, explain how that original grade came about, but certainly do better the next time.
Thank you for chiming in. I was about to ask how a student, who just got that C-, knowing that they'll apply in a couple of years, what they should do. That's excellent advice. We have a follow-up question on the non-traditional question posed earlier. Are gap year students considered non-traditional?
I mean, it's a self directed question, right? So I think that's a question for the applicant who posed that. And, I think 5-10 years ago, it was very uncommon, I think, to, take a couple of years off. And now we're seeing a very large influx of applicants who take 1-2 years off, and it's becoming somewhat more traditional. So I think it's really for the applicant and to kind of reflect and think about their path and whether they feel like that is traditional or not traditional, and explain to us why, if you feel like, you may have taken a sort of less traditional route.
Yeah, I think that's one of the areas that really causes a lot of anxiety for students because it's not as black and white as they'd like for it to be, especially with, I think the sections that we see on our online communities being discussed the most often are always going to be entering coursework. You know, is this course going to be one of these or one of those? And they don't always have the tools that they need to determine that. And of course, when entering coursework, just do your best job, and then Team DSAS will fill in the gaps to make sure that your GPA is calculated correctly. Another section is going to be activity section. You know, was this one volunteer activity where I actually saw a doctor getting a cup of coffee? Is that considered healthcare experience? And it's like, you know, there are gray areas all over the place throughout the application. I think you hit a really great point there where if you can explain it in an interview setting, if you can explain it to the school and defend why you would put something in a specific part of the application, then you're the one that knows your experience is best. And it's up to you to explain those to the school. All right, we have a question that I think a lot of students have about UT Southwestern, and it's, is research a requirement for getting into UT Southwestern?
No. You know, again, that's a short answer. No, there are absolutely not. And again, we have a very holistic approach to evaluating any applicant, and that's a realm that some people pursue and has spent a lot of time and have been very successful. And we certainly look at that. But if somebody has had no research, many students, accepted students, do not. So if they do, the other side of that is that if people list research, we do delve into, you know, is it simply a matter of a course they were taking and list that as, you know, their research, or was it something that really they pursued an area of discovery and may have presented a poster at some setting, a meeting, or published. And so that gets, you know, is valued as well. But there's no points taken off, if you will, or a disadvantage if you haven't done research.
I'll just chime in that I absolutely agree with everything Dr. Rubin said, but I would encourage people that it is a valuable experience, and sometimes students who don't realize that they would really have a passion for it. You know, we would encourage people, if you have an opportunity, that would be a real positive experience. And many students even did not have research coming into medical school and have medical school research experiences while they're a student, and just fall in love with research and end up later on joining the MD PhD program after the fact because they're so passionate about research. So if you have the opportunity, it's a great experience, but again, not required.
You know, and another aspect of this is that we are, you know, we accept a wide range of students with wide interests that go into virtually every specialty under the sun. But there are certain missions that we're particularly attuned to. One of those is those who are interested in going into academic medicine or research. And so if you're somebody like that, one way to demonstrate you're serious about that is to have some sort of portfolio, if you will, or experience in that in your application. So that is something that, you know, we look for it. On the other side, we also, another mission is to increase those going into underserved areas and primary care. And so, again, experiences that reflect that those are true interests are also equally important.
So, Dr. Beck, as a previous advisor, how would you guide a student who may be curious about research, hearing some of the feedback that we just heard, that you know, it's not required, but if it's something that students are interested in, they should definitely pursue it. How can an undergraduate student or maybe a post-bac student who is research curious kind of explore that opportunity?
I'll definitely start with your professor. In any of the classes, check to see if they are involved in research projects at your school. And many schools also have a special section that you can register for and get credit for doing research with different professors. And you can get multiple hours of credit for that, because invariably, if you're doing research, you spend more time in the lab than you get the credit for it, just like in a lab course. And so explore the different projects that your professors are involved in, number one. Oh, also, summer internships. Those are valuable. I know UT Southwestern has the summer research projects. Could you elaborate a little bit on how people could get involved in those? I know this is a different area in your school, but
yeah, the graduate school offers the summer SUMR program for undergraduate research, which is a really wonderful opportunity for students to get involved in our laboratories. So that's a really wonderful opportunity. So they can approach that. You can just search the website. There'll be links on how to get involved in that. Once our medical student summer research program is open to incoming students before they matriculate. So that's another option. But there are other various summer opportunities, involvement through the STARS program, and different types of opportunities to get involved at Southwestern.
Lots of opportunities for so many students. And I think kind of thinking outside the box for some of these opportunities can be really helpful, especially with reaching out to professors to see if there's anything you can do to help to get some experience there. And obviously taking advantage of your community to see if any of the local schools might have opportunities like what Dr. Mihalik just brought up. Okay, we are moving right along. We're about halfway through our session. Take a quick breath because there are so many questions coming in. I have a question here from a student asking about step one. With step one moving to pass fail soon, do you think there will be more emphasis on step two? I know UT Southwestern has an interesting curriculum that gets students in a clinical setting sooner. So I was curious if there were any changes that might be on the way for the current curriculum that might be best suited for this change.
So great question. There's still quite a lot of unknowns. They have said that the earliest that the change would be the January 2022, but there's not been a confirmed date. So we're still waiting to get confirmation of when that change will occur. So the earliest would be our incoming class that are about to start in August. I think we have no plans to change the support that we provide to students for preparation, just to ensure that they all pass that. How residency programs are going to use other parameters that they have currently used for step one is really unknown at this time, and something that we're going to have to be monitoring and tracking. One of the things that we're real proud of is that our students do incredibly well on the step 2 CK. The clinical training experiences that we have through our partner hospitals, Clements University Hospital, Parkland Children's Medical Center, the VA, are really outstanding, and our students are incredibly well prepared, such that when they're taking the test, I've seen that patient. I've seen that patient too. So I think the benefits of having such an enriched clinical training program allows our students, and for the practice with the clerkship shelves along the way, they're very well prepared to excel. And we know that we have evidence of how they do compared to the nation. So I feel really comfortable that if step 2 kind of steps up to take the place of step 1, that the students at Southwestern will be in good stead. I think the other, we're constantly looking and working on ways to help our students develop all the competencies they need to be outstanding residents and have the training where residency programs are really looking for those students that are best prepared to be excellent residents. And that's something that we have had the benefit of having that national reputation, because how rigorous and our opportunities for clinical training has been. So, but you're right, there's a lot of unknowns of how this will go down, how residency programs will evaluate candidates off of that. But there's really some good too with regard to the level of anxiety that's associated with step one and, the score. And that has been exacerbated in COVID with all the cancellations. So all the Mcat stress and anxiety that applicants have faced, our students have faced with step one administration and cancellation. So it's been a very difficult time. So I'm looking forward to decreased stress, but again, there's a lot of what's going to happen next, and we'll be there to support our students throughout, no matter what happens, to ensure that they're really well positioned to be successful.
Thank you for that. Just a quick glimpse into your futures as future Western students.
Yeah.
There are so many moving targets going on right now, and that's just another one. So thank you for that. We have another question I think we could kind of tack on to the curriculum questions. I was wondering if completing a thesis requires a medical student at UT Southwestern.
So it's not, but we do have several different distinction pathways where you can participate in an area of concentration that you're really passionate about, whether it be research or medical education or global health or quality improvement. So there's 6 different areas where you can do your scholarly activity during your clerkship phase and research and time during the summer after first year and a 4th year elective. So there's a smattering of a recipe of different experiences that you can put together. And then you do a culminating thesis. And if you do all of those different components, then you're qualified to graduate with a distinction in that area. So there's community health is another area. So there's so not required, but lots of opportunity for you to find your passion and to be able to really dig deep into a subject area that you're really excited about and pursue if that's something that you're interested in.
Lots of opportunity should be the slogan for UT Southwestern. The common thread here. All right. We have a follow-up question to the research internships discussion that we had a little earlier. How are summer research internships done at other medical schools valued in comparison to those done directly with UT Southwestern?
There's no devalue or evaluation. It doesn't really matter. It does not matter whether that experience is at UT Southwestern or elsewhere. If there's a excellent opportunity, research opportunity, wherever that may be, I would take advantage of that and not, worry that it's not at UT Southwestern.
Thank you. Okay. There's a question here about, how will UT Southwestern look at GPA for a student that has a BS and an MS? So I believe this might be a question of assessing GPAs.
So, Leah, you can chime in, but I don't think it would, at the end of the day, really matter overall. I'm not quite sure what exactly the question is. I mean, we would evaluate what their science GPA is and then total GPA, and I don't think there's really a difference or would be evaluated significantly. Well, would not be evaluated differently.
Yeah, and it may be a question.
Any other applicant.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
It may be a question more about sort of TMDSAS's calculation of various GPAs, and TMDSAS will deliver, I don't know, Enrique, how many is it now? Maybe six different GPA calculations to
Then there are definitely well over 20 different types, because we do undergraduate, graduate, post-bac, by semester, by year, by type. there's so many different calculations that you all get.
Yeah, so we'll evaluate your cumulative overall GPA. We'll evaluate your undergraduate GPA, your BCPM, which is your science GPA. So your question may be getting a little bit more at that, and we'll of course look at your complete academic history, both sort of BS and MS coursework.
All right. Okay, let's see. There seem to be quite a few questions still coming up about submitting an application without an Mcat. So I want to take the time to reiterate what we discussed earlier in the session. UT Southwestern will accept applications that are being transmitted from TMDSAS without an Mcat score, but you may not receive an interview invite until those Mcat scores are received. And to accommodate the delays in the Mcat for this application cycle, the panel just mentioned that the interview season has been extended. There have been additional dates added to their interview season in comparison to other years. And those dates do coincide with the delayed delayed TMDSAS match date, which is now in March. So if you have that later Mcat test date, or you're concerned about submitting your TMDSAS application without an Mcat, I know it's scary, but know that TMDSAS and all of our member institutions are in constant communication. And when you submit your application, you're submitting quite a bit of information that alerts the school that there will be more documentation coming in. And as soon as that documentation is available, the schools will receive it and they will start looking at applications over again. So they don't just review applications once and then throw something into the pile. There's not like a dark corner for applications without test scores. They're definitely coming back to those. So don't fret. This is definitely a different cycle, and I really appreciate the feedback that our panel today has offered on that subject. And I wanted to reiterate that because there are still several questions coming in on that subject. So here's a question about the interviews for this cycle. Have there been any discussions about potential virtual interviews for the medical school due to COVID-19?
Yes, yes, there's been a lot of discussion. I think, schools across the nation have been, really evaluating sort of what is the best approach to take with all this sort of uncertainty going forward. So UT Southwestern has decided to conduct virtual interviews for the entirety of the upcoming 2020-21 application cycle. So our interviews will be conducted online, remotely, most likely on a Zoom platform. We are going to stick with our kind of, the plan of now is to stick with our Saturday interview model. We're have always been known for this 2-day really fun, interactive 2-day, interview program where applicants come on Friday and spend the day with us and then come back on Saturday for their interview. So we anticipate interviews will still be on Saturdays, and we'll attach a lot of sort of interactive online events with that interview, things like student panels and opportunities to meet our deans and some presentations and videos. So we anticipate sort of a Saturday kind of 3 to 4 hour schedule. And we'll still stick with our sort of back-to-back faculty interviews in a traditional format. So the sort of preparation for that will be very similar to what it would have been in an in-person format. And, I think we're confident that, our faculty will be trained and ready to really, conduct those in an online setting. So that's our plan. And I think we anticipate, as we always have, we typically start extending interview invitations in sort of July for mid-August to late August interviews.
Thank you. So we have another question that came in about weaknesses in an application. There's someone who has not enough volunteer work or enough leadership that they were hoping to improve on this year, but was cut short because of COVID-19. How would their application be considered? And some students, some more information here, some students are still not able to go out and work due to their family situation. So for activities that may have been cut short, or different enrichment things, activities that students may have been preparing to do, but now cannot. Do you have any feedback or advice for them?
So as has been stated a number of times, this is not a normal year. I think every person on this planet has been challenged. The admissions committee is no different than the applicants in terms of living the unique circumstances, and we're certainly reviewing everything with the understanding that there are unanticipated challenges. So, there's no, absolute comments I can make one way or another, but certainly we understand that people may not be able to pursue their interests or complete activities that they, previously may have planned. And so, again, I would encourage, some discussion perhaps in the application, and there's ample space to do that. But I think, we are very understanding of the circumstances, and we are interpreting everything in light of the real world that we're all experiencing. So.
Yeah, I'd echo everything Dr. Rubin said. I think, for those of you who maybe aren't, I assume people are at every sort of stage of their undergraduate career, joining this call. I would also kind of emphasize, and I heard another faculty member from another institution say this, preparation for medical school is a marathon, right? Not a sprint. So it is important, that you're doing some of these activities, clinical or healthcare related activities, volunteer or service, in a sustained way over time, right? To show your commitment over time to certain types of activities. So, our hope is that you've been, for those of you applying now, have engaged in some of those things throughout your undergraduate tenure, maybe even dating back to high school. So for those of you who are maybe sort of rising freshmen or sophomores, this is just a good reminder to make sure you're really engaging in these things that will set you up and set your medical school applications up for success throughout your 4 years of undergrad. But I certainly echo what Dr. Rubin said about our flexibility with specifically this semester. And we're well aware of the, disappointment and hardship many of the applicants are facing and the activities they aren't able to pursue because of COVID.
I would add one recommendation in that in the application, there's a area where you can talk about planned activities, and you'll write that, and then an application will be submitted with those plans sort of dangling there. But I think it's probably more important than ever if there were planned activities at the time of the application that during your interview, it'd be an opportunity to follow up and see if indeed those plans were able to be, took place or not. So I would just think about that. If you have plans of a relevant activity, it may not necessarily be in a letter of recommendation, and so there may not be a way for the admissions committee to assess whether that activity, which sounded good, actually took place. And there may be a good reason why it didn't take place, but certainly if it did take place, to bring that up.
Thank you for that feedback. And I did want to also add from previous Courage sessions, since a lot of our pre-med students and pre-dental students particularly tend to be not just type A, but like type A plus, you are not the type to just sit around and just wait for opportunities to show up. So we live in a really great age where you can go out and seek information. You can go on YouTube and find videos that can help you kind of be exposed to different areas of medicine, different systems, and just keep your mind active in that sense, so that when you do have the opportunity to go back to clinical settings, to go back to volunteer activities, you're hitting the ground running rather than trying to recover from being stagnant for several months. Okay. We have another question about how different things are viewed on the application. Somebody has a course that they dropped and then subsequently made an A on that course. And they're asking specifically based off of just that point of information, how that might be viewed.
You know, it depends upon what the course is too, I think. You know, I think it's a minor issue if this was just to be extreme, you know, a badminton course in physical education versus organic chemistry. But if the person got an A in that course and it was in a key course, then that's what we look at. So.
Yeah, it's difficult to make a judgment off of one piece of data like that. I think a lot of what's been discussed right now is the totality of your application. And when you come down to, is my MCAT too late? Is this activity in the right section? I had to retake this course. Will that make or break me? Maybe, maybe not. Again, if it's something that's shown throughout your application and it's a flaw that may be continued, maybe, and we mentioned earlier, you know, maybe you have to retake a test, you have to retake a course a few times, and then you had to retake the MCAT. That might raise a couple of flags. If you have several Q drops, that would definitely raise a few flags. If you don't have enough activities, but maybe you have a lot of employment experience, that might actually be something that's offset. So the schools take everything in the application within the context of your application. So that's why it's so difficult for us to say, yes, this will make your application great, or no, that will not. It's the totality of your application that is considered.
It may also depend on when it happened and if you have an upward trend in your grades.
I was going to just say that, yes.
So many things to consider. Okay, we have another question. I'll be taking my MCAT on September 11th. Would it be recommended to apply this cycle or next cycle? If that's the date you can get your MCAT and the rest of your application is ready, apply this cycle. If you are not ready to apply yet, then you should apply next cycle. But don't let the MCAT be your make or break point, just as we just mentioned. All right, 2 questions from one student. Here we go. Regarding interviews, will they be conducted online exclusively, or will those be in the DFW area have an opportunity to come to campus?
So interviews will be conducted online exclusively. We really reflected on this, and we felt for equity purposes and to keep the sort of system fair and calibrated throughout the entirety of the season, that we were going to commit our resources to do really effective online interviews. So your interviews will be online regardless of if you interview in August or in January. However, you know, we recognize the importance of students stepping foot onto a campus to really experience the culture and, you know, the buildings and the hospitals and the sort of environment of a campus, because every school has a kind of different look and feel. And so we hope that, you know, later on in the season, if depending on sort of, you know, what the status of COVID is and what the restrictions currently are on our campus, that we'd be able to give opportunities for students to come physically visit us. So, you know, we don't have a crystal ball right now. I think that is certainly our hope for the spring to, you know, do, I guess we'd call them first looks because they wouldn't be second looks, but to give our, you know, our interview candidates an opportunity to come and really, you know, see UT Southwestern firsthand. So that's where we're aiming for, but I can't make promises at this point based on what the current restrictions are here on our campus.
The virus will dictate.
Yes.
And if you do find that crystal ball, we've got a business proposition for you. The follow-up question to that post is, do you anticipate pre-match offers to differ this cycle? If so, to what degree? So before we get into discussing anything related to the match, I do want to lay the groundwork for that. For those of you who may not be too familiar with the match process, TMDSAS has a process where each one of the schools will rank the applicants that they've interviewed, and you will rank all of the schools at which you've interviewed. And then we put those into an algorithm that goes into what we call the TMDSAS match. So it will pair you to those schools based off of where you are on the schools list and where the schools are on your list. It's extremely complicated math that I'm not even going to try to get into right now. But following that process, the schools do go into a rolling admission. Obviously, some students may still be active in other I'm sorry, I lost the word. They may be waitlisted on some other schools' lists, and they may still be active after the match. And so they'll come back, and there'll still be a lot of movement and a lot of rolling admissions afterward. But leading up to the match, the schools do have the ability to send out pre-match offers, which essentially means, hey, we like you, we're gonna rank you high on our list, but it doesn't guarantee that you're gonna match here. And so those pre-match offers will start going out on October 15th, which is also the same date that out-of-state students can begin to receive offers of admission. So with all of that groundwork laid, how do you anticipate pre-match offers to differ this cycle?
I mean, I don't anticipate that many changes because so much in the sort of overall timeline has shifted in tandem. It all, will depend on how many students have kind of been interviewed by the end of the pre-match period, because there's sort of a, I guess a month there where no offers can be made sort of around the match. So, but, I don't, and Dr. Rubin can correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think that there's going to be any sort of major changes to our process in terms of how we think about pre-match offers, how we think about going about the match, and so on. Because, the transmission of applications was delayed a month, we're extending the season by a month, the match was delayed by a month. So everything's just kind of shifting forward or later in the season.
Yeah, and for those of you curious about the TMDSCS match, we do have a video and a really great resource available on the TMDSCS website under medical section. And then next steps after applying, there's a section just on the match for you to take a look at what this looks like. All right, we have about 5 minutes left. We're going to take a couple of more questions. If there are more questions that we didn't get to here, we do invite you to ask in our online communities. We're very active on there. And we do have other folks from other institutions, advisors, and other professionals and subject matter experts that are ready to help there, as well as peers to help address your questions. So I know we weren't able to get to all of them today. But I do want to make sure that we get to, let's see, this person, she's asked the question a few times now. Is writing a thesis in undergrad something that makes you more competitive when applying to medical school? And I think we've kind of addressed this a few times, but love to hear your take on it.
Again, I think a short answer is no. If that thesis turned into a publication, that would be looked at, favorably. But I don't think we don't screen or make decisions whether this applicant has a thesis and versus another. So the short answer would be no. But there's always scenarios where depends upon the quality of what is written and the situation I mentioned, whether it was went above and beyond just coursework.
All right, thank you for that. And thank you all for submitting questions. Now this is a courage session. The purpose of this is to help encourage our applicants, both current and future. So we did want to do a quick roundtable to provide any last minute feedback or support, words of wisdom to our applicants.
I would just say, we recognize, like Dr. Rubin said, how stressful and sort of unpredictable this time was. And we understand a lot of you are in situations that you couldn't have anticipated. So do your best with the application process and be yourself, be authentic. I think at UT Southwestern, we admit students with a diverse array of backgrounds, people with musical talents and athletic abilities, and in addition to sort of abilities in the sciences. So it's important to sort of don't try to just fit the mold, but really be authentic in your application and sort of have confidence in what you've done and the skills you've developed.
Yeah, I agree completely. Well said. And I guess I would just add, if you really have thought through this and this is your passion, there's a lot of challenges in the world today. whether, the recent events of this past week or the pandemic. But if you're really dedicated to helping, your fellow populations, whether it's in the community or individual patient care. I mean, I've been in medicine for now more than 35 years. It's a wonderful profession. We're very privileged to be in this profession. And if you've really thought through this, I just encourage you to continue to pursue this. And the opportunities, the excitement in the coming years between science and delivery of healthcare and the challenges as well are going to be just remarkable. So I encourage your interest and encourage your applications.
And I'll just add that this is an unprecedented time, like everyone has mentioned, and I think for those of you pursuing medicine, there's so many incredible role models right now of people that you can be really proud of that have been on the front lines. And if that is motivating to you, that you want to be part of that, to really be where other people run away from, but you step forward and really serve the suffering, then you're in the right field. So, I mean, encourage you to keep pursuing your dreams and your mission.
Thank you so much for that. Thank you so much for everybody that's joined in, submitted your questions. I do want to thank our panelists, once again, Dr. Merhalik, Ms. Scouten, and Dr. Rubin for joining us, and of course, Dr. Deb Beck for her co-hosting and giving us the feedback as an advisor. And on behalf of TMDSAS, the Texas Health Education Service, and of course, UT Southwestern Medical School, we'd like to wish all of our applicants the best of luck. Be safe out there, and we are excited to see your application come through soon. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.